I began to talk more about, menopause. It's a time of transition for people who are losing estrogen and losing progesterone. And I began to talk about it more in conversation. Like I would just use the word menopause intentionally in conversations because I wanted to get comfortable with the word. And I wanted people around me, including my family members, to get comfortable with that word and understand what that word is and not be ashamed to hear the word. And I didn't want to be ashamed to say the word, not to my family or not to anyone else. Menopause has long been shrouded in secrecy, leaving many clueless, ashamed, and embarrassed to seek and extend support for one of the most natural transitions and rite of passage. Well, the spirit and mood have changed. People are surrendering to curiosity, knowledge, and empowerment. In this podcast, I'll share my own experiences and point of view, peek into the lifestyle and self-care practices of people experiencing menopause, and tap experts for their take on the pausal phase. This is for you if you are one of the millions of people in the menopausal phase or want to support them. I'm Dixie Lincoln Nichols, health and well-being educator and wellness founder. This is the Pause Pod. Welcome back to the Pause Pod. I'm super excited that you are here. Today I'm sharing 4 ways to support your well-being during the menopausal phase. Of course, we know menopause is a dynamic experience. It changes from 1 week to the next, from 1 month to the next, from 1 year to the next, because once you are in the menopausal process and in the menopausal phase, there's no turning back. You go from one stage to the next, from perimenopause to menopause, which is not long lasting, to postmenopause. And postmenopause is where we shall stay for the rest of our lives. And throughout that whole postmenopausal stage, which is where I am now, things change. The body changes, symptoms change, so much changes. So it's a dynamic process. It doesn't stay the same. How it starts is not going to be how it is in the middle, and it's not going to be how it is in the end. And so one of the things that we can do is adjust accordingly to navigate as best as we can to what's happening to our bodies. Understand as much as we can what's happening to our bodies and show up as much as we can and as fully as we can for our bodies. Whether you are in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause, these 4 ways can support you on your journey. It can make life easier for you. The ways in which I experienced perimenopause and writing them down helps me now that I'm going through the postmenopausal process and the postmenopausal phase. So it was trial and error, and I learned and I unlearned until I had a system down that supported me. And I realized that, okay, this is what it's going to take to help me through this, because for many people, experiencing the process is difficult. Not saying it's only difficult, but I'm saying there are difficult times. Support means everything during this time. Like with every stage in life, we need resources to navigate this phase, to move through it as healthily and as fully as we possibly can. That, of course, is going to look different for everyone. We are unique beings, and therefore our experiences are going to be unique. What your mama experienced, what your grandmama experienced, you may not experience. What your friend is experiencing, you may not experience. Now, you may have some similar experiences, but you will not experience it identical to anyone else. Just like your fingerprint is not identical, the way you feel, the symptoms that present themselves will not be identical. And so it's important for each person to come into awareness of their bodies, of their symptoms, of what they're experiencing, of what their needs are, and accept those things that are happening, and then take action to manage what's happening. Okay, so number 1, take time to process what's happening. And I don't say that lightly, because many people want to rush. Like, what's the next step? Chill, calm down, focus on what's happening with your body. Really come into awareness, recognize those symptoms that are happening that are unusual for you. Write them down, start jotting them down. So if you're feeling a little hot, write it down. If that's unusual for you, write it down. If you are having heart palpitations, write it down or go to the doctor, go to your primary care doctor. Those symptoms can be something else. So we never want to take it for granted that we are experiencing symptoms and just immediately say that, ooh, this is menopause because I am in that age range. or dismiss it because you're too young. I started perimenopause at 38 and didn't initially make the connection because I didn't think that it was going to happen so young. I expected it to start happening in my 50s. Even in my mid to later 40s, I expected the symptoms to start surfacing and materializing, but it started at 38 and I did not make the connection in terms of what was happening. For me, it started with the feelings of anxiety, the heart palpitations, the headache, the heavy periods, etc. And so it was over time that I identified these patterns and realized what was happening to me. There was no one to tell me anything or give me any information, much like Sonia, who was on our last podcast. No one told Sonia what was going on. No one told me what was going on either. So there is that pattern that I know many millions of us experience. No one's talking about it. Even in this day and age, people are still being very silent and suffering by themselves in silos. We don't want that. So take your time to process what's happening, and processing can look like observing the symptoms when they present themselves, writing down your feelings or the symptoms. If you can identify them, write it down. So be in awareness of what's happening to your body, be in awareness of when it's happening to your body, and don't shove it aside. Don't just take it for granted that it's something that's going to pass. And if it's perimenopause, it is going to be recurrent. So if you notice that it's not a one-off thing, definitely write it down and definitely consider, well, what's my age? I'm 35. Perhaps, maybe because it happens to people at 35. I have friends who it's happened to at 35. And then for some, it happens at 28 and even younger, depending on the situation. It's very rare, but it happens. So know that the timing that we've always been led to believe that leads to perimenopause is not always the case. It's usually and predominantly the case, but there are lots of cases that happens outside of that 50-year-old range and outside of that 45 plus range, right? So be mindful, be very cognizant, and be very aware of what's happening. And as things start to unfold, as symptoms begin to unfold, just process it, take it in, absorb it, sit with it, connect with your body. Know that your body is very intuitive and it's going to communicate with you when things are happening. You may not know at first and you may be a little confused, but you're going to put two and two together and you're going to arrive at the answer. And now, in this day and age, there's a lot more information out there. A lot more people are talking about it. There's a lot more openness and vulnerability around menopause. You will put two and two together, but allow yourself the pleasure, because it is pleasurable in some ways. I feel like it's a time of so much growth. You step into this space of increased wisdom. And of course, not everyone is going to experience all of this, but it's the hope. You transition into this wisdom stage and this stage of super independence and super autonomy and this stage of super, I don't give a shit what people think, what people say. This is how I want to show up. This stage of wanting to be yourself, fully yourself. And it's a wonderful feeling. And you get to feel that by processing what's happening, by taking your time and understanding that you are moving into a different stage. It comes with its own set of complexities, but once you learn how to navigate all of that, it's beautiful. And I'm not saying that everyone is going to go through this because, again, remember I said everyone's different and we're all going to experience this in different ways. Some people have no symptoms at all. Process what is happening to you. The second thing I did was ask questions. Now, I love science. I absolutely love science. I've always loved the body, specifically the human body, intrigued by it. And I've always been curious. I've always wanted to know. And so I'm always asking questions, always listening, always paying attention. And so I paid attention to what was happening to me. I arrived at a conclusion. The conclusion was not wrong. And then I began to ask questions. Even before I arrived at a conclusion, I had my suspicions. And so I started to ask questions. So I asked questions to different groups of people. I started with my mom and my grandmother, and then I asked my aunts, and then I went to my parallel peers. So these are the peers that are the same age group as me. And then I went to my older peers and I got information from everyone. I have to say, there are some of my peers who didn't really feel comfortable talking about it and their experience. And so they were very vague, and that's okay. You don't want to pressure people. If they are not ready to be vulnerable, to share, to talk, that's okay. Find someone who will, because there are people out there who will. There are family members who will share deeply with you, and there are ones that are going to be really vague. Then there are friends, your parallel pairs, who are going to be very vague with you. And then there are ones who are going to be deep. Same for my older friend group. There are ones who are very deep, and then there are ones who are very shallow with their answers because they're not ready to talk about it. So ask your questions, and you will know who to go deeper with based on the responses that you get. So I went to my grandmother, asked her. She gave me as much as she could think of, which is she never had any symptoms. She never had hot flashes, or she didn't have anything wrong with her. And I was like, Granny, you sure? I think I shared this in my first solo episode. And she was like, yeah, I never went through none of that stuff. And, I have to believe her, because I don't know if she knew enough about menopause to understand what she was going through. I don't know. But she did say she never had all of the things that people talked about. Also, last week, I went to see one of my doctors. This doctor I was seeing for the first time. She's a new member of my medical team. She said to me, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you really jealous. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? And she said, I have never had menopause symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. She says, I never went through any of that. And she's in her early 70s. And I was like, yeah, totally freaking jealous. Totally jealous of you, lady. Because I've had my fair share of night sweats and hot flashes, and I still have them. Again, they've declined in frequency and intensity, but I still have them occasionally. I wish I didn't have them, because it's one of those really unpleasant symptoms of menopause that everybody knows about. Once I got information from my mom and my grandmother and my aunts, I moved on to my parallel pairs, and I started asking, hey, are you experiencing so and so, my sister, who's 2 years older than me? I was like, are you experiencing menopause? What's going on? How are you feeling? She's like, nope, nope, not there yet. I was like, okay, menopause. What the hell are you talking about at 39, 40 years old, lady? And so I had to go to other people. Of course, all at the same time, simultaneously doing research around all of it and what it meant and what it looks like and what are some things that I could expect. But reading is one thing, hearing people's stories and hearing people's experiences tend to humanize the whole menopause experience. And I identified a lot more with people when I spoke to them and I heard their stories. It was more impactful, it was more meaningful, because there was another human being telling me their story, what they experienced. And so that meant a lot more to me than the research part of it. The research was absolutely helpful, but the stories were super, super impactful. My grandmother's story was impactful. My mom's story was impactful. My mom experienced menopause in a silo, talked to no one. All we knew was that she had hot flashes. Daddy was uncomfortable. He was like, your mother, she's either hot or she's cold. And that's the extent of what we heard. And then, of course, I probed her more and I asked for more details to go a little bit deeper. And so I got more information. She, on the other hand, unlike my grandmother, has symptoms. Hair loss was one of her big symptoms, is one of her big menopausal symptoms, but again, didn't really talk about it, and then there were all kinds of different scenarios that got blamed for the hair loss, like, well, I'm not moisturizing my hair enough, or I'm tying my hair too tight. So there were all these things, which were all possibilities, but never once was menopause thought of as a reason for why it was happening. But eventually, she came to understand that that's what was happening. My parallel pairs, we were kind of in the same boat, more or less, because everyone's kind of going through the changes, the symptoms. Some were further along than others. And so I got whatever I could from my friends who were further along than me. The ones who were like right where I was just as confused as I was. Most of the stories I learned from and that were also super impactful were from my older peers, who were super, super helpful. They were so nourishing and they gave me so much information. They fed me and they spoke to me about their experiences, and they spoke to me about where they were currently, some of the things that they went through emotionally, psychologically, physically. They talked about measures that they took to manage their menopausal symptoms. They talked about things that worked and things that didn't work. But guess what I realized? To sum this one up, no one's going to come to you and give you answers if you don't ask. you have to ask. Ask the questions. Ask what's on your mind. Ask, ask, ask. Whatever is going through your head, ask. Write those questions down that you want to ask and ask. Write down the questions you want to ask of your family members. Write down the questions you want to ask of your peers, your parallel peers, your older peers, and write down the questions you want to ask of your doctors, which is the last group that I asked questions of. Now, they were just as unhelpful initially. I hope it's gotten better because it's been 12 years, but they did not give me any help. My doctors never once asked me if I was going through menopause. My primary care partner, we have a great relationship, and she's been one of my doctors, my main doctor, since I was 22 years old. When I suspected that I was going through menopause, I went to her and I laid out the symptoms after I'd gotten lots of answers from friends and family members and documented my symptoms. I went to her and she says, "Yeah, you're going through menopause. Perimenopause. Your body's getting ready for menopause." And, we talked about what to do and what not to do. That's a whole nother podcast. I'll talk about that. But we talked about what I should do, what I shouldn't do right now based on how I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And so those are the groups that I asked questions to: family, friends, and doctors. The third thing I did was I began to talk about it. Asking questions is not the same as talking about it. Asking questions are: what are you doing? When did it happen? How did it happen? Where did it happen? Those are the things that you need to consider when you're asking questions. The W's: who, what, when, where, why. I began to talk more about, menopause. It's a time of transition for people who are losing estrogen and losing progesterone. And I began to talk about it more in conversation. Like I would just use the word menopause intentionally in conversations because I wanted to get comfortable with the word. And I wanted people around me, including my family members, to get comfortable with that word and understand what that word is and not be ashamed to hear the word. And I didn't want to be ashamed to say the word, not to my family or not to anyone else. I talked about it amongst my family members whenever we had events or we had family gatherings. Menopause will come up. I will talk about it. I started to just drop that word. So I was just name dropping. I was menopause name dropping everywhere I could. And a lot of times I would see the startled look on people's faces or the numb look on people's faces because they wouldn't know quite how to respond to me. But I didn't put them in a position to have to respond to me at all. I would drop the name and move on. In some situations and circumstances, I did linger on the topic, but usually it was me saying something and moving on. And so talk about it. Talk about it as much as you can. Get comfortable saying the word menopause. Get comfortable saying perimenopause. Get comfortable saying postmenopause. And then get comfortable saying the symptoms that come with it, like hot flashes, night sweats, low libido, dry vagina, right? All of these things are a part of the process. Again, it's not the process for everyone, it's not a part of the process for everyone, but it's a part of the process that we need to become comfortable with. It is nature, it is our lives. These are things that happen to our bodies. And so there should be nothing to be ashamed of. The fourth thing I did was share my experience. Now, there is a difference between talking about your experience and sharing your experience. Talking is much more general, like name dropping, like talking about the menopause process as it pertains to people who are experiencing a decline in estrogen and progesterone. It is more generalized information that you are given or you're talking about. Sharing, on the other hand, requires a bit more vulnerability. It's more personal. When you are sharing your emotions. You are sharing how you feel. You are sharing your experience and your journey. And that can feel very frightening and that can feel very scary. And so, yes, it requires vulnerability to openly share about something that, number one, has been tabooed. Number two, people have been taught to be ashamed of. And number three, that has not had the support of family, the government, or community for that matter. So I began to share with people what I was going through, what I am going through. I began to share my symptoms. I began to share how I navigate my journey. I have a Facebook private group, by the way. If you want to be a part of that group, definitely hit me up, send me a DM, or you can find it on the website. But I started to engage my peers and younger people or older people who needed support within this community. And we started talking about things that we experience. And so we share what's happening to us. And I knew that by sharing, that I was going to open up the floodgates for others to share. I gave myself permission. So I knew sharing would give others permission to speak openly about their experiences as well. Now, sharing doesn't mean that you have to go out in public. You have to go on Instagram or you have to go on Facebook or any kind of social media to tell people what to share with people, what's going on. You don't have to do that. You can share with your partner what you are experiencing. For me, and this is my opinion, I feel that if I'm in a partnership, I owe it to my partner to explain to my partner what's happening to my body so that they understand that this has nothing to do with you. Me wanting a night alone or wanting to sleep in a bed by myself has nothing to do with you. It has to do with me. I want a good night's sleep or whatever the case is. Me wanting to leave the room while perhaps we're watching television because I'm too hot or I'm too cold has nothing to do with you. It has to do with me. Me getting angry and popping my lid has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. So I need to be in awareness of what's happening to me. And you need to be in awareness of what's happening to me so that you can support me and you can also be understanding of my current circumstance or situation or journey or process or whatever it is you want to call it. So if you want support, you're going to have to speak up. I do think that sharing with somebody, a confidant, a mentor, a doctor, it is a relief off my shoulder. It is a stress reducer because I have shared with everybody in my family, in my network. I've shared online and everywhere else. I'm going through menopause. And that's just me. Like I said, sharing does not mean you have to go out and tell the whole world. I choose to do that because that's my field. I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, and I love learning and I love sharing. So that's why I do that. And so you get to choose how you want to be vulnerable, how that vulnerability looks for you. And so that vulnerability might look like you talking to your sibling, your sister, or your brother, or talking to your mom, talking to your best friend, talking to a teacher, like I said, a mentor. You get to choose, but know that sharing your experiences opens up the possibility of growth and development and healing and management and navigation of this phase because alone, you'll feel it. You will feel the weight of it alone. And especially for those who are going through symptoms. I don't know how people who don't have symptoms navigate this experience. I will be bringing somebody on the pause spot for sure to talk about how they navigate their experience. But I can speak from my experience, which is one of symptoms. I've had several symptoms. Of course, I've heard that there are about 80 plus symptoms or what have you. Not every symptom is recognized in the medical community, but even the ones in the medical community, some of them are, oh, they're heavy enough that people can have a hard time managing and can experience a lot of discomfort. So, sharing and being vulnerable is absolutely, absolutely something that supported me and if this is something that works for you, figure it out how you're going to share if you want to share, and that's it. But even if you decide not to share, I want to say this even if you decide not to share, there is no need to feel the need to explain to anybody. There is no need to tell people that you don't feel like sharing. You don't have to tell anybody anything. It is your business, it is your right to not share. Vulnerability can simply look like you being honest with yourself about what you are experiencing so that you know what you need. That's it. And so if you don't need to share with anybody, that's okay. No explanation is necessary, not to anyone. What I gave was my opinion in terms of how sharing helps and supports because I am surrounded by people who are a part of my world, who are affected by this menopausal experience that I'm going through because of how I am experiencing it. And so, out of courtesy, out of love and care and respect and honoring those people who are around me and there for me, I feel an obligation to let them know, to share with them. And of course, it's also for selfish reasons too. And in this case, I'm totally okay with being selfish because I want to help myself. I want to have as much support that I can possibly get so that I can navigate this process as healthfully as I possibly can. So I'm going to just recap. So, number one, take your time and process what's happening to you. Number two, ask questions. Number three, talk about it. And number four, share. That's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for leaning in and listening. Do share with your friends and anyone you think will find this useful. Find the podcast on all platforms where podcasts are played. So iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Audible, and every other podcast platform. Do leave a review. Also, check out the podcast on the website, thepausepod.com. And if you would like to join the Facebook group, send me a DM. I will also have a link on thepausepod.com where you can request to join. Also, do sign up for the newsletter. When you log onto the website, dixielincolnnichols.com, you can sign up for the newsletter there, or you can also sign up for the newsletter on thepausepod.com. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you so much, and I look forward to chatting with you on the next episode. Have a great one. Let's perimenopause and prosper.